The medevac helicopter touched down hard on the hospital's emergency pad just before dawn, its blades still screaming as the doors flew open. Inside was a man who barely looked alive anymore. Blood-soaked combat gear, ash-gray skin, chest rising in shallow, uneven spasms. The tag on his wrist read "Only male, mid-30s, GSW, multiple trauma." But the silence around him was louder than the alarms already starting to scream. Doctors rushed in, barking orders, cutting away fabric, pushing fluids that didn't seem to matter. The bullet had torn through him somewhere overseas, and by the time he reached American soil, time had almost run out. His vitals dropped again, heart rate erratic, oxygen crashing. One of the surgeons muttered under his breath, "We're losing him." At the edge of the trauma bay stood a nurse most people barely noticed. Her name badge read Emily Carter, and she wasn't senior staff. No medals, no reputation, just a calm face and steady hands. While everyone focused on the monitors, she watched the man himself. His jaw was clenched, his fingers twitching as if he were still holding a rifle that wasn't there. Then he whispered something. It wasn't a name. It wasn't even a word most people would recognize. Just two broken syllables, barely audible under the chaos. Emily froze. Her breath caught as recognition hit her like a shockwave. She leaned closer, ignoring the sharp look from a resident who thought she was in the way. The man's lips moved again, forming the same sound. A call sign. Not one listed in his file. Not one anyone here should have known. Emily's voice trembled for the first time as she spoke softly, directly into his ear. "Easy. I hear you." The monitors spiked, just slightly, but enough for the room to notice. The dying SEAL's eyes fluttered open for half a second, locking onto hers with a focus that shouldn't have been possible. Around them, doctors were still fighting numbers and charts, unaware that something far deeper had just changed. Because the room felt tighter now, as if the walls themselves were leaning in. Emily stayed close to the gurney while the doctors resumed their frantic rhythm, pushing meds, calling out lab values, preparing for a procedure that everyone knew was a long shot. The man's heart rate stuttered again, dipping dangerously low, and a sharp tone from the monitor cut through the air. "Stay with us," one of the doctors said, loud and firm, more command than comfort. Emily didn't raise her voice. She leaned in until her mouth was just inches from the SEAL's ear, her tone calm, steady, almost familiar. She repeated the call sign he had whispered, carefully, exactly the way it was meant to sound. His breathing hitched, then steadied just a fraction, like a soldier responding to a voice he trusted. The lead surgeon glanced over, irritation flashing across his face. "Nurse, step back. We need space." She should have obeyed. Protocol said she should, but something stronger than protocol held her there. Emily shook her head once. "He's not gone," she said quietly. "He can still hear us." The surgeon hesitated, just for a second, but that second mattered. The monitors stabilized enough to buy them time. Blood pressure crept up from nothing to something. Not good, but alive. As they rushed him toward the operating room, Emily walked alongside the gurney, her hand resting lightly on the rail. The SEAL's fingers twitched again, this time finding the edge of the sheet and gripping it with surprising strength. His lips moved, silent now, but his eyes tracked her. Images flashed through Emily's mind. Sand, heat, a radio crackling with static, a voice calling that same call sign in the dark. Memories she had buried deep, because no one back home was supposed to know that part of her life. Especially not in a hospital hallway thousands of miles from a battlefield. The doors to the OR burst open. Bright lights, masked faces, the smell of antiseptic. As the team transferred him to the table, the surgery dragged on longer than anyone expected. Minutes bled into hours as the team fought internal damage that looked more like a war zone than a human body. The bullet had shattered bone, torn muscle, and left fragments everywhere. Twice, his heart faltered. Twice, they shocked him back, each time with less confidence than before. Emily waited outside the OR, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the red light above the door. She replayed every detail in her head, the call sign, the way he'd responded, the unmistakable recognition in his eyes. She hadn't heard that call sign in years, not since a night that ended in gunfire and screams over a radio that suddenly went dead. A younger nurse approached her quietly. "You okay?" she asked. Emily nodded, though her chest felt tight. He's a fighter, she said. He's not done yet. Inside the OR, the surgeon was losing patience with the numbers. We're running out of options, he said, frustration leaking through his professionalism. If he doesn't stabilize in the next few minutes. At that exact moment, the heart monitor settled into a stronger rhythm. Not normal, not safe, but steady, enough to keep going. The anesthesiologist frowned at the screen. That's better. No one said it out loud, but everyone felt it. This man was holding on for something, or someone. When the surgery finally ended, the surgeon stepped out, mask pulled down, exhaustion etched into his face. He's alive, he said carefully. Critical. ICU. Honestly, I don't know how. Emily exhaled a breath she felt like she'd been holding for years. As they wheeled the SEAL past her toward intensive care, his eyes opened again, clearer this time. He found her in the crowd instantly, like he'd been looking for her the whole time. His lips moved, dry and cracked. Emily leaned closer, ignoring the alarms and the stares. Not yet, he whispered. The words were weak, but the meaning was unmistakable. She answered just as softly, her voice steady despite the storm Reese. The ICU was quiet in a way that felt unnatural, every sound sharpened by the steady beeping of machines. Tubes and wires surrounded him, keeping his body doing things it could no longer manage on its own. The doctors called it stable, but Emily knew better. This was a narrow ledge, and one wrong step could still send him over. She took the night shift without hesitation. No one questioned it. ICU nurses were always needed, and Emily never drew attention to herself. She checked his vitals, adjusted his and spoke to him in low tones while the rest of the unit slept. Near midnight, his hand moved again. This time it wasn't random. His fingers curled slowly, deliberately, around hers. Emily froze. His eyes opened, unfocused at first, then sharp as recognition cut through the haze of medication. His voice was rough, barely more than air. Didn't think I'd hear that call sign again. Emily swallowed. You weren't supposed to, she replied. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, painful and brief. Guess I'm harder to kill than they thought. She almost smiled back, but then his breathing faltered, shallow and uneven. The monitor reacted instantly, alarms starting to rise. Emily leaned in, her forehead nearly touching his. Listen to me, she said, her voice firm now. You stay with me. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Just like training. His chest rose, then fell. Once. Twice. Slowly, the alarm softened. He looked at her again, eyes searching. You were there, he whispered. That night. Emily didn't answer right away. Her grip tightened on his hand, grounding them both. Rest, she said gently. We'll talk when you're stronger. But inside, the truth echoed loudly. She hadn't just heard his call sign once. She had been the last voice on his radio before everything went wrong. Morning crept into the ICU through narrow windows, washing the room in pale gray light. The SEAL slept under heavy sedation now, his chest rising in a slow, mechanical rhythm. Emily stood at the foot of the bed, reading the chart she already knew by heart. Name still classified, unit still redacted. But to her, he was no longer a mystery. A doctor she hadn't met before entered quietly, older, with the posture of someone who'd seen combat, even if he now wore a white coat. He studied the patient for a long moment before speaking. He asked for you, he said. Emily looked up. When? Before we sedated him again. The doctor's eyes narrowed slightly. That doesn't happen often, especially not with men like him. She nodded once. He's used to knowing who's watching his back. The doctor leaned against the counter. You military? Emily shook her head. No, that was true, at least officially. He stabilized overnight, the doctor continued. But there's something odd. Every time he starts to crash, his vitals recover right after you speak to him. Could be coincidence. He paused. Could be something else. Emily met his gaze without flinching. He's fighting, she said simply. Sometimes people just need a reason. The doctor studied her a moment longer, then gave a tired smile. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. After he left, Emily pulled a chair closer and sat beside the bed. She spoke quietly, telling him where he was, what day it was, how the sun looked outside. She avoided the past, avoided names, avoided the night that still visited her dreams. His fingers twitched again, brushing hers. His lips moved, soundless this time, but she read them easily. Why are you here? Emily leaned closer, and whispered the truth he might not even remember later. "Because you brought me home once," she said. "And now it's my turn."